basically what I try and do is I want my piece to be as big as possible and still nicely bend around my radius without too much stress. That's going to vary a little bit on your species. Something like a white oak with some pretty straight grain like this is going to bend pretty easy. But if I'm bending a piece just a nice gentle radius, I might be able to go a little thicker than this. But if I'm bending really, really tight, you can see how maybe I need to go a little thinner. The fewer pieces, the better. The more your pattern is going to look as though the grain just kind of travels around that. There's two options to bending. We could glue lam a bunch of pieces together and use our router and just router it out, right? We just cut it out of a full big chunk. We're gonna have miter joints in it. That's one way. That's gonna be the cheapest way. And then we go to something like this, which is truly custom, where we're gonna make it appear as though the wood grain kind of bends around the wood, the piece. It just bends, okay? For that, some of the species that work better or something like a rift product, really straight grain, because we are cutting a kerf, which is basically almost the same width as our piece of wood. So we're losing roughly, if we're making an 1.5 inch piece, we need roughly a 3-inch piece to make it, because we're losing half of that every single time we make a cut. We're gonna keep all these oriented if we can. So as we cut them, we're gonna pull them off to the side, try and keep them oriented, okay? And they're gonna stay that way. Once we build this, we're going to tape them together until we're ready to bend them. So we're gonna have them all taped together. We don't wanna just throw them in a stack because it's a nightmare trying to line up all those angles. It's pretty easy now, but when you get 20 pieces, and some of our bends will be 8 or 10 inches wide. So yeah, you got a lot of pieces there. So basically you just set your fence up and just keep ripping pieces. Okay, this is nice to have another guy that's going to catch that little sliver. Be very careful. These little slivers tend to try and shoot back at you because that blade is cut and they come back with force. Okay, so we're going to cut this about right here and see how that bends. So you can see how those pieces now get put together back on the saw when you line them up. Okay, that's how you're going to orient them. Okay, so what we need to do is cut enough of these to make our 1.5 inch, is what you guys wanted for your bend, and then we'll take them over. Now when you start your bend, if you look at this, we'll line these pieces up in the middle. As we start that bend, you can see how these tracks, look how much they're off. The outside gets shorter. Okay, and you can see the stagger on the ends of both of those. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have enough, and we always start our bend in the very middle. And that's going to give us as close to a true orientation as you work around that board. So the little bit of kerf that you lose will get lined up again, but it does go off just a little bit at an angle. You can use white glue, you can use like a Gorilla urethane glue. We're going to use isocyanated finish for our adhesive. So when we lay all these out, I know my first one I don't need to put adhesive on because I'm going to put them on all the rest. I'm going to lay all these out nice and flat. My teardrops. Once we start this process, we don't really stop. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do with our cams and our teardrops. So we have lefts and we have rights on our teardrops. So all that means is that as I put this in, I'm going to drill this pin in, the closest one to the cam, to the edge, and then this will work on a pivot and it'll rotate in and tighten that. I want it to pinch and pull the wood to the right on this side of my bend, and to the left, which is why it would be this way on this one. Okay, so that way I can make sure everything stays nice and tight. So this one here would go here and rotate, and you can see how it would pull that in and keep it nice and tight. So I have my lefts and my rights here are all in piles. We'll start in the middle, and as we're going, we'll take some loose pieces probably out of here, and we'll actually use them on top to help hold this down. Okay, so we'll actually, if there's a cam in here, I'll probably throw a piece across here and screw into both of them, and that'll help hold this piece down. You good?
That's good.
We're gonna go pretty quick here. You guys hand them to me and I'll line them up. Don't have a lot of time here. Okay, it's hitting something there. Okay, watch fingers. Go this side. I'm gonna help pull me this in, kind of keep pulling it in a little bit. There you go, like that. Somebody grab me a mallet, would be great. Push it in. I need to take you home. You're strong as an ox. See this? I know why your wife married you. You can pick up heavy stuff, huh? Same thing. Keep pushing. There you go. We'll get one started here, and then we'll. Okay. Another cam. Okay, so you can see how our lines one of them got off a little bit there, but for the most part that grain should follow nice around that whole thing. So, don't clap yet. We haven't taken it out of the form yet. And we're gonna route a 1/4 inch groove in the very middle of what we just bent. When you're routing wood that's bent and it's under a lot of stress, it can do weird things, like I'm now changing the strength, I'm cutting through some of that, and if I do that before, while it's just on its own pressure, under all that stress, while it's being helped with the cams, it's gonna lessen that for sure.